Hello and welcome to this Business Central video. I'm Gavin and this is part 2 of a series of videos on dimensions. So the first video, if we just do a very quick recap, went through what is a dimension, why we use them, why it's such a great piece of functionality to enable our extra analysis, and then we went through adding a transaction and just seeing them in action. So in this video now I want to take that a step further and have a look at what other features we have around dimensions. So for example, we want to be able to make them mandatory. So we're always ensuring we're capturing these dimensions when we're entering transactions. And I'm also going to look at how we can block certain types of dimension combinations where it doesn't make sense. So if we bob into Business Central, and we're back in Business Central now, back on in our IT solutions demo company. So this company is selling products and services, and they've only got one GL code for sales, as we've already mentioned. So we want to always make sure we're capturing dimensions against this sales code. Otherwise, we're just going to get everything posted into sales. Well, we could fall into that scenario. So if I drill down onto sales and go into account and go into dimensions, and now in here, I can select the dimensions, product. I always want to capture product. So I'm going to say I want to make this mandatory. Likewise for services, I always want to make this mandatory. Now, what are the other options we've got available? We can say same code. And what that means is if I choose a dimension value, that means whenever I use this sales code 4001 for product, it's always going to default BC for Business Central, and I'm never going to be able to change it because it says same code on here. So I create an invoice for this, try and change it to GP and hit an error, which doesn't make sense for this company, so we'll take that out. And I could also say no code, which means I never want analysis for product against this GL code, which again makes no sense. So I'm going to change that to code mandatory. Now, what I can also do, although this is code mandatory, I can also think, right, okay, what's the most this is going to be used for to help the user when they're entering the transaction to default the value through. So my business, or this business, is generally around Business Central. So I say, okay, I always want it to default Business Central. And the vast majority of my services are going to be consultancy. So therefore now what I'm telling Business Central is for code 4001, that it's mandatory to analyze to these two dimension codes, and I'm going to default these through for the user. So that's great. So let's have a look at what we could do. Say, if I scroll down, because we can put these dimensions on multiple codes. So rather than going into each individual one, say I want to have some analysis, say on software and licenses, I can go into it and say, right, okay, software and licenses, I want to have product analysis, that's mandatory. And actually for services, it never makes sense for me to buy a license for a service. Therefore, I'm going to say never analyze to that, so I don't get that murky in my figures if anybody ever analyzes services against this GL code. But what happens if I want to assign a GL lots of I don't want to go into every single one. So I can say, right, okay, well, I want to select all these expenses here, all the way down to repairs. And I always want, so if I go account, dimensions multiple, oops daisy, and I can say, right, okay, I always want product analyzing on this. It has to be. So if I go mandatory, now it's just, without me going into each individual one, if I say have a look at depreciation expense now and go dimensions, that's the way to select more than one at once. So this is great. We're doing it all around the chart of accounts. What else can we do it on? Well, we can do it on pretty much every entity, every bit of master data. So customers, vendors, fixed assets. So if we just choose customers as an example, I can go into customers, choose all my customers, or this particular one, and say, right, okay, this dimension, I always want region because I want to be analyzing which region my sales are coming from. So this is the power of dimensions. I can set up a new dimension and start analyzing my data in all these different ways. Now, this leaves us a bit of a conundrum because I can quite easily select all these and do the dimensions and do the dimensions multiple here as well. And that will assign them all to regions. So if I just delete them and say new, I always want everyone to have a region, go mandatory, like so, and that's just on every single customer. But what happens if I had a new customer tomorrow and forget to do that? So Business Central has a function to be able to, whenever you add a new customer, to automatically make it default. And the way you do that is if you go into dimensions, and I go into dimension here and go account type default dimension, and I can, so I'm doing this on business division. I didn't actually want to do it on that one. I wanted to do it on my region. If you remember, I always want to analyze my sales against my regions. So if I go into here and go dimension account type default, so this is the defaults for region, and I'll say pick up my table of customers. Where are you? There you go. And I can say that that is going to be mandatory. So now, regardless, if I had a new customer, forget to fill in the dimension on the customer, this captures it. So that's great. So now I've kind of stopped that little loophole. And you can do that on all these other tables as well. So I could choose vendors, and this is the list of where you get that functionality available. Now, finally, if we go into, you can also block certain combinations, because it might not make sense to have a certain combination ever being used on a transaction, because it'll never happen in real life. So if you have a look at an example for IT solutions, we go dimension combinations, and we select, say, product and services. So we want to limit these here. So first of all, if you do want to limit them, what you have to do is you have to say, you have to click there and say, yes, I want it to be limited. And then you can drill down on it and choose your limits. Now, I don't want to do it on that one. So what I'm going to do is for services and product, if I go into here, I'm going to say that, so you can see here what we said is we never sell Azure consultancy, therefore I've blocked it. If I never sold, say, Azure support, we don't have any capacity to do any support. We can do the services, but we can't do any support. So I'll say I never want that combination to be used. So I can click on here and say that's blocked. If I've ever made a mistake and say, yeah, I do sell Azure consultancy, then I can just open that up again. And you can see here we've blocked onboarding. So that's one way where we can block combinations, so they're not used on transactions, because it doesn't make sense for our business to do that. So that's kind of the wrap for this video. So in this video, we have been through all the different options that we have on dimensions, the code mandatory and setting defaults, and you can set it so they always use the same code. And also we've been through the various combinations. So on the next video, we'll have a look at adding new dimensions, how to do that properly, because you've got to go into general setup or you find issues, and I'll explain that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.